for My Dreaming Soap. Welcome to my channel and thanks for dropping by. Now for today's soap we're going to go back to the 70s and we're going to do a soap on a rope. Now to be honest, I had already recorded this intro when I made the soap, but I realised there was a lot of time that you were going to just be spent there looking at a pair of hands on the screen waving around talking about stuff, so I thought, well, perhaps maybe I should actually do it so you can see me. I'm not entirely sure if that's better or not. Anyway, soap on a rope. Now it's one of those things that, gosh, I remember it being around when I was growing up and all that sort of stuff. But certainly you do see people talking about and making soap on a rope, you know, regularly on Facebook groups and sort of things like that. And what I always find is when these posts pop up, there's always an awful lot of questions about what rope do you use, what method do you use. So I thought what I'd do is do a video which just explains the way that I do a soap on a rope, because I do make some of them and they sell pretty well. So this is literally my method. I will talk quickly about the other methods and I will just specifically talk about why I don't use those methods. I'm not saying that the other methods are rubbish or not any good, but I'm just explaining why I choose the method that I do for my soap on a rope. Okay, so the first thing that normally is discussed or you need to decide on is the actual method that you're going to use to make your soap on a rope. And really there's sort of two main methods of doing it. You can either make your soap just like a normal soap. So your soap in either individual cavity moulds or in a loaf, chop it all up into slices and then add the rope afterwards. And there's various ways of adding the rope afterwards. Some people stick a straw through the soap while it's still relatively soft, not long after cutting. Some people will drill through the soap, or some people even in their mould put something like a stick or a round, stainless steel rod or something actually inside the mould so that a hole is created when the soap is poured through it. And then that's pulled out after the soap has saphonified. Okay, and then what happens is they take their rope and they put it through the hole that they've made in the soap, tie it up, and there's the soap on a rope. The other method, and it's the method that I prefer, just personal choice really, is to add your rope to the soap before it saponifies. So you pour your soap and the rope is in it straight away, and then the soap saponifies around the rope. Now the reason why I use that method, as I say, purely just personal choice, is that I want my soap on a rope to stay as being soap on a rope for as long as possible. I think if I bought a soap on a rope because I wanted it to have a rope attached to it, I would want that rope to be there as long as it possibly could. And I kind of feel that with the methods that you put the holes through, at some point either the bar is going to break at the hole where it gets a little bit thinner. Potentially stress cracks can be added if you drill through your soaps and that sort of stuff, and the rope can break off. Now, lots of people are very, very successful at doing this. So I'm not saying it's a flaw that people always have. But I don't know if you've seen them. Sometimes you see soap on a rope and they almost look a little bit like gift tags with the hole drilled right towards the top of the soap. And no matter which way you look at it, that is going to wear out at some point and leave you with a soap not on a rope. So therefore, for me, I like the idea of the soap being right around the rope with the rope right in the centre. So essentially, it's the last thing that you're left with as you've used all of your soap up. So that's my personal preference for the way that I do it and the way I'm going to do it in this video. Now, the second issue is what rope? Oh gosh, now I'm not going to give you a definitive answer to this. I know probably people want me to say, you need to use this rope and it's here and you get it from here. To me, soap on a rope And the rope that you actually use to make your soap on a rope just really depends on what you're looking for, what your ethos is about how you make your soaps and that sort of stuff. There are lots of things that you can use for the rope in soap on a rope, and I'll just talk to you about a few of the main ones that I see people using. Paracord is very popular. Okay, what they make parachutes out of, it knots nicely, it's resistant to any mould or anything like that, it's lovely and strong, and it does make a lovely soap on rope. You get it in all sorts of colours and it looks great. Other things that people use, you can even use things like washing line cord, you know, the cord that they make outdoor washing line with. Again, that can be very strong, resistant to any mildew and mould and things like that, and a great option for a soap on a rope. I don't use either of those. I use a pure cotton rope, and this is actually macrame cord that I use. Now, the reason that I use macrame cord, pure cotton rope, is because I try very hard not to put any plastics where they don't need to go. So for me, all of my packaging is plastic free, and to me it's important to not give someone a soap on a rope and have the rope in that being a plastic rope or a rope that has plastic components in it. And if that's the type of way that you want to go, then something like a macrame cord is great. Do be careful sometimes when you see cotton rope, which is basically what macrame cord is. If you see one that says it's really strong, just check those out carefully, because sometimes they have like a little centre cord made of plastic in the middle to make them stronger. So if it is important to you that you don't want a plastic type rope in your soap, then just check what you're buying very carefully. Now, some people say, well, hang on a minute, that's cotton, won't that go mouldy and mildew and horrible? I've done quite a lot of testing and I don't find that it does. Certainly, if someone got their soap in a rope and they just left it in a puddle of dampness and whatever, then yeah, possibly I guess it could. But remember, the idea of a soap on a rope is that they hang it up to allow the soap to dry, and they don't need a soap dish. So if a soap on a rope is used how it's intended to be, I've never had any problem using this just type of cotton cord. There are other sorts of outside cords, sisal and hemp and things like that. You get all those, and those are very nice and resistant to any moulding and mildew. I do find with those though, they can be a little bit hard and a little bit rough and a little bit spiky. Okay, so this is why I use this macrame cord. Whew, told you it would have been a lot of just looking at hands. Last thing I'll talk about, and I can't remember whether I've put this in the rest of the video or not, I can't remember when I'm going to cut it off and start you looking at my waving hands, is the thickness of the cord. Again, this is something that needs to be personally preferable to you. I use a 4mm thick macrame cord. Now, the reason I chose that is because I must admit, when I first started doing these, my other half said to me, oh, that's quite thin. It's a deliberate choice that I make. Remember that typically when you do soap on a rope, you're going to knot the cord at the end. And the thicker your cord is, that has two effects on your knot. First of all, thicker cord is less likely to knot well than a thinner cord. You know, if you imagine you've got a thin piece of cotton, you knot that, try and undo that knot. Whereas if you've got a bigger, thick cord and you pull it into a knot, it comes undone very easily. Which, especially if you're going to do the first method of making soap on a rope, you know, where you add the rope after the soap makes, then that's really important that that knot does stay together. So for me, 4mm is a nice thickness. It's nice and comfortable without being bulky on the soap, and you can do a nice knot with it and slip it inside your soap with less risk of it popping through and showing on the outsides. Whew. Okay, told you there was a lot of chat about soap, rope and how we do it. Come on, let's go and make some soap. Okay, so now we've talked about the types of rope we might want to use and the method of making our soap on a rope. Let's think about how we're going to prepare our rope. The first thing is to think about how much rope you need. Now, there are two considerations really here with how much rope you need. The first is you need to think about how big your bar of soap is, because you want this rope, ignore those fluffy bits at the end, you need your rope and the knot to go and sink into the soap a nice long way. I put mine almost down to the bottom, but I don't want it poking out the bottom. And then the second thing to consider is how big of a loop do you want coming out of your soap? Now your loop has two purposes. I think there may be more. If you know another purpose, then you can always put them in the comments below. The first purpose is people use soap on a rope because they don't want to bother with a soap dish, but they want their soap to hang up somewhere and they don't want to keep bending down to pick it up. So this must be capable of hanging over things. So people might want to hang it over the head of a tap or something, or somewhere in their bathroom. So therefore make sure that this rope is going to be big enough so it would slot over something like a tap handle so people can put their soap there. Otherwise, if it can't hang anywhere, there's no point in having the hangy bit of the rope. The second bit is, think about someone washing with this soap. If you've got the soap and you've got the rope and it's next to the soap and you're washing with it, that's quite annoying and you don't want it to get soap all over your rope. And what you'll find a lot of people do is they will use their soap on a rope and they will actually put it over their hand with the rope, with the soap coming out of the bottom there, and then wash with it like that. And it means they can keep hold of it, it's not going to fall on the floor and they've got to keep picking it up, and this piece of rope is out of the way. So the other thing to do is to make sure that this is big enough to go over someone's hand comfortably. And as you can see with this small bit, ignoring the fact I could never get my soap on there, it's quite annoying. So make sure you leave enough rope. Now I've done extensive testing. Well, no I haven't. I've asked a few blokes to put their hand through some rope holes that I've made to come up with a good size that wasn't annoying for them to try and get it on their hands, but it wasn't too flappy. So what I do with mine is I found a good loop size is a very precise 17 centimetres. And so what I do is I take mine to 17 centimetres, and that's the size of the loop itself. Okay, so it'll be double that in rope length. I then think about adding on my soap size. So the soaps that I make are short, fat soaps, so they're 6 centimetres tall. So I know 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So 23 centimetres would be the full length that I want for my soap on a rope. Right, let's think about how we actually do this then. So I will take my rope and I will typically cut it to, and I want it to be finished at 20, just under 23. So I will typically cut mine to about 28 centimetres because that gives me enough time or enough space to do my knot. And then I actually tie a flat-ish knot. Now I don't think it's an official flat knot, but it's a flat knot. Now if you just want to do a simple knot by just grabbing the ends, twisting them together and pulling, then that's great and that's perfectly fine. The reason I do a flat knot is because I like the idea of my knot being quite flat so I can manipulate it in my bars better, and I'm less likely to have bits of rope knot sticking out the side of the bar or getting in the way when I do my cut. Now if you don't want to look at tying a knot, fast forward a few seconds. Right, knot tying, how I do it. You've got your rope. Now I'm going to do it on a big scale, just so you can see. I take the end of my rope and I loop it, and that loop goes round and underneath. See, can you see I've just looped it like that? I then take this and I then fold it back over the top. Okay, so this is the situation I've got here. I then get my other end, and this may look counterintuitive because you'll want to shove it up there so that you tighten those together. But no, you take this and you pop it in that top loop. And this other loop, you pop it into that bottom bit of the loop. Okay, it's a bit funny, doesn't it, at the moment? But then what you can do is you can then shimmy and pull that. And can you see how that makes, I'm just not going to put it too tight because I want you to see the style of the knot. Can you see how that makes a nice knot that's reasonably long, so it'll be nice and grippy in the soap, but it's also nice and flat. Okay, so you're going to need to watch it a few times if you want to do that same one. Should I go over it again? So I take the end and it goes underneath. So I've got a loop, and then I take it over the top. And then I take this end and it goes down in there and then down in there. And then you grab those two bits, and remember to grab this loop at the top, and then you can shimmy it along, and that gives you a nice flat knot. Now what I actually do with mine is I do it on quite a small scale, because I want my knot to end up right at the end here. So I actually do it as small as I can. I literally go right to the end and I do my little knot. On a pretty small scale. So what I'm trying to do is I'm keeping that knot as far towards the end of my rope as possible. And then I just sort of jiggle it about and get it nice and flat. And then I pull it tight. And then I just check it. And I can see, yep, that one's fine, because that's come to 22 centimetres, so it won't stick out of the bottom of my soap. Okay, and I do trim them nice and tight. I don't want extra bits sticking out of the bottom. And remember, your soap is going to go all the way around this and stop it unravelling. There we go, that's a lot on knot making, not soap making. I'm just going to finish the rest of these I need for my soaps. Let's have a look at how I prepare my mould now. Now I choose this mould to use because it's a nice skinny mould. It's just over 5.5 centimetres wide, and I like that because that's going to be the face of my soap. Now there's nothing wrong with having a wider mould if you haven't got one this skinny. The reason I like a skinny mould is because then it allows me to do a fatter bar of soap. And obviously if you can have a fatter bar of soap, it's a more chunky soap, which I think people who like soap in a rope kind of like chunkier soaps. And also it gives us more scope for dropping that rope inside. So as you can see, I've worked out how big I want my bars. So I took the length of my mould, and I just mucked around and divided it by bars, say like 10 bars, 9 bars, 5 bars, whatever, until I got to a bar size that I thought would work for me. So for me, this divided nice and evenly into 7 bars. And as you can see, I've marked those 7 bars on here. Now when I do this marking, it's only temporary because it's not something I'm always going to use this loaf for. So I just put a little bit of tape along there and mark on the tape. So that's my bars marked. And then I've seen various people do all sort of complicated contraptions and things for their ropes. Now you could, in fact, just take a rope, pour your soap and pop your rope in the soap. The problem with that is that as you lean your rope over, the rope's got to go somewhere. It's going to pull that rope sort of to one side of the bar, and I want my rope sticking out nicely from the centre. So what I do is I just use an elastic band. Now, my mould has got these little sticky up bits on the top, these little sort of handly things. So what I do is mine's got bolts there, I just put the band through the bolts, over the top and down the other side. Now, if you've not got a mould with things like that on it, then you could always just put a bit of string around your mould, or you can tie your band down and then tight together at the bottom, you know, you could use 2 elastic bands together or something. I find elastic bands work quite well. It does have to be fairly taut, and then I just line it up. And then what I will do is I will take my ropes that I've done my 7 ropes that I need, and before I pour my soap, I pop them in. And can you see, I'm just not at the moment trying to line them up or anything. I'm just literally getting them ready to use, as it were. So I haven't got to go and find them later. Now, do you need to get to this sort of state of preparedness? Not necessarily. If you've got a slow moving fragrance that you're going to use, then you could put them in afterwards. But I know I'm just all nice and ready. I've got everything sorted. So I just need to make up my soap. When you make your soap on a rope, you can of course do whatever design you like in it, but typically we see these soaps really quite simple. I'm just going to do an ombre in mine. Now obviously, if you were going to do something, I don't know, maybe you're going to do a hanger swirl or something, you'd have to consider that when you're setting up your mould. Because if you wanted to do a hanger swirl, you'd have to do your hanger swirl, and then, you know, if you're going to do the band thing, you'd have to put those bands on afterwards. So just think about it as you're working it out. So, for mine additives, as it were, I'm using Happiest fragrance oil. Now this is supposed to be a dupe of something. I don't know what, maybe it's called Happiest. Now this is, it says it has floral notes, but I can't detect them. It's much more, it's got a little bit of citrus in there. It's a very spa-like fragrance. And it's definitely got a slight spicy tone, a little bit of woody tone, but it's very fresh and very spa-like. I think it's definitely a very unisex fragrance. And then colouring wise, I'm just doing a simple ombre. So I'm going to use Electric Blue from, which was You Make It Up, now Pure Rock colours, and some titanium dioxide in my ombre. And that's all that I'm using it, keeping it very simple. So I've got all of my oils for this fairly small batch of soap, and my lye solution and sodium lactate. Just getting that poured in. I never need to strain my lye solution. I know some people do, and that's because of the way I make up my lye solution. I make up my lye solution and then I keep it sealed straight away. So when I used to make small amounts, I used to put it into a nice sturdy bottle, but now I put it into a sealable tub and just let it not get exposed to any air at all, and then I decant it into nice lye safe bottles and always keep it bottled up, and then never gets any of that lye lint or anything on it, so it's always lovely and clear. Right, so there's my oils and everything in. I'm soaping at a reasonably cool temperature. I typically soap between 80 and 90 degrees, and these are sort of low 80s. They're about 82 degrees Fahrenheit, because I want this to stay nice and fluid. Now, your choice of fragrance oil is important if you're going to use this method, because you need your soap to stay fluid so your rope will drop through the soap. If you're using a fragrance oil that moves quickly, you may struggle to actually get your soap into your rope, so you do need to consider that. Or your rope into your soap, rather. I said that round the wrong way, didn't I? Now this fragrance oil is a nice slow mover. To be honest, I haven't used it yet, apart from the testing that I did. And I actually tested it twice. At one point, I got a little bit of ricing, and then the second time, I really mixed it really well, and I didn't notice so much ricing. It didn't rice badly. It may just have been that I put some in and I tested a few things at a time and left it sitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it at this stage, just so I can make sure I give it a nice, decent blend. And if there is any chance of ricing, I will get the chance to blend that out. Whereas if I add it at the stage when I've put the colours in, it's a little bit more difficult to then blend out because I then need to start blending smaller amounts. Okay, and I can't, it looks fine. It must have just been that little bit that I tested where I think I got a bit distracted and I sort of maybe left it sitting. I can't see, no, I can't see any ricing at all in that. So I think we are okay. Sometimes you seem to get ricing a little bit later on. I don't know if you've ever noticed that if you make soap yourself. You put something in, you'll mix it, and then what will happen is it will rice, and that typically happens again if you've left the soap sitting there for a little while. Right, now I just want to divide these out. I'm going to put about 1/4 into here, and then the rest I'm just going to colour with titanium dioxide. Now on this type of pour, just sort of eyeballing it would have been absolutely fine. And you know, it doesn't matter if you didn't split it out exactly. I just find it easier. If I have jugs that are all the same type of jug, it's quite easy to divide it up. I struggle going from a jug like this to a jug like this and trying to work out what 1/4 is that's poured off. And yes, there are some markings on the side of my jugs, but they're quite faint, and I just find that by the time I've faddled out trying to see the markings and all that sort of stuff, it's just easier for me. Pop to my scale and then just weigh it. It's just faster for me. But yeah, if you're good at eyeballing, I'm just rubbish at it when I've got, you know, different size jugs like this. I get all confused about what I'm doing. So let's do this ombre then. So I've just got mine on my Cheshire Cat Angler, and I'm just going to do the ombre as I would with a normal soap, hoping not to get my bits of rope in the way. Okay, so I think I'm done there. And one of the things you've got to be careful of, obviously if you've got your ropes already on, is try not to get any soap on them. Let's just tip this up very carefully so we maintain that ombre as much as possible. And then I'm just going to get the last of this soap down this side. Okay, then I'm going to leave it at that. Oops, bit of careless blobbing in, but there's some blue there. Oh well, never mind. So I now want to make sure this is nice and straight. And now we've got to get these ropes in. So you may need to find something that can help you dip them in as such. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one needs to go in this space here. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure this stays between my cut lines. Okay, and I find quite helpful as it starts to get a little bit thicker. Take a little skewer and just pop it into your knot. Not too much because you don't want to pull the knot back up again. And then use that to push it down into your soup. Okay, so they're all in, and now I'm just going to make sure I'm just tidying up, get them nicely in what's going to be the middle of your bar, and I like to have my strings pushed nicely together. There we are, I think that's fine, they look nice and level. I've got a little bit of soap up the side here, but that's fine, that won't end up on the bars. Okay, so these are now done. And they'll go in the oven to C-pop as normal, and then we'll cut them tomorrow. So there we are unmoulded. So let's get these cut, shall we? So I've got my soap here. And this is, you've seen it before, my caterpillar from Custom Craft Tools. It does come with a little ruler to put on the end, but I'm not a fan of trying to line stuff up with a ruler, so I've made myself a little gauge, and I've put that to the size that I want to chop my soaps. So we just need to make sure that we keep the rope out of the way, and if we've put the rope in correctly, we should be able to just slice through and not hit any of the knots. There we are, and I think that's really pretty. I do like that. Okay, and it's a nice chunky size, and you can see our soap rope is right through the middle there. Just carry on and do the others. So then we have our cute little soaps on a rope. And to finish these off, I will just go through and just bevel the corners so they've got nice little, just smoother corners on them. And then they'll be finished. And as normal, I'll just leave you with a couple of pictures of the final soap. These soaps and lots of others that you may have already seen in my videos will be going live in the shop update on the 12th of March, that's this Saturday at 6 p.m. UK time. So make sure you get yourself over to the shop if you've got a particular favourite that you want to grab. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you like the soap. If you have, it would be great if you gave me a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Happy soaping!